We're rolling into week 13. We're getting ready for the fantasy playoffs. A lot of people are dropping their midline wide receivers and they're stacking up running backs. They're looking at handcuffed running backs. They want to be set just in case their starter goes down and they don't want to fight off the waiver wire for a running back that's all of a sudden getting the bulk of the touches. I decided today we're going to go over all the handcuffed running backs. We're going to go team by team and identify the guys you want to pick up, the guys you need to think about, and the guys you kind of want to watch from afar. But before we dig in, you need to click that subscribe button right now. We're going deep on the waiver wire every single day. You can kind of count this as a waiver wire video. We're going deep on the You Need series, doing deep dives on those trending players who's jumping up the depth chart. On top of that, we're using these videos to help you set your lineups. Click that button. Stop missing out. We're going to go through this kind of quick, a little faster pace because we got a lot to cover here. First running back, Buffalo Bills, Ray Davis. If something happens to James Cook, we know he's going to step up. He's going to get some work in the passing game. He's good between the tackles. He's actually a premier handcuff running back. We already know what he can do on the field. He's very dependable in pass protection. He's not going to be really get messed with when it comes to the touches. He's also good in a pinch right now as a backup running back if you got to throw in if you're hurting that bad. Ray Davis is a premier handcuff running back right now. Jaylen Wright is a shotgun running back with a lot of upside. He's starting to take some of Mostert's work, if not most of it. Devin is the starter, and we might get to a point at the end of the season where they just start exploring what he can do on the field. On top of that, if something happens to H, and they're going to be riding him. And Tua's good. They're moving the offense a lot more efficiently compared to the start of the season. He's a top-tier shotgun running back on the back end of rosters right now. Antonio Gibson. He had his moment this season, a few up and down games when he got some opportunity. He can catch the ball in the backfield. He's using the passing game. It is the Patriots. Ramondre Stevenson's getting a lot of work. If something happens to him, he could be the next man up. I kind of want to look at him kind of from afar. I don't think he can be a league winner, but he can also be a touch getter who can catch in the ball in the backfield, getting some touches. Could volume his way into okay fantasy production, but you're not going to rely on it. Braelon Allen. If something happens to Breece Hall, he's going to have a lot of upside. He's going to get a lot of work. He's also using the passing game. Also, you want to look at some of the other running backs here behind him because they do look at two running backs often. Breece Hall's getting a lot of work because he's Breece Hall. But those backup running backs might get a little bit more work than expected if Braelon Allen gets the job behind Breece Hall if Breece Hall goes down. But Braelon Allen's going to get a ton of touches if something happens to Breece Hall. If I have Breece Hall, I'm locked in with that top running back. I want to make sure I got his handcuff going into the fantasy playoffs if I got room for it. Ezekiel Elliott. I'm watching from afar. I think all you guys are too. Something happens to Rico Dowell. He might get some volume. Dalvin Cook's on the practice squad right now. You're watching this whole thing from afar right now, but you need to pay attention because touches are touches. Devin Singletary can be productive. It just won't be sexy, but he can make guys miss. Tyrone Tracy's just a lot better, but if something happens to Tracy, Devin Singletary could volume into some production. You're kind of watching it from afar, but not as far as you would be for like an Ezekiel Elliott. Devin Singletary does have some gusto. He's very shifty, just not as explosive or fast as a Tyrone Tracy, but he can get you some production with volume. Kenneth Gainwell, a stash that needs to be picked up, an underrated stash option. If I have Saquon Barkley, I'm not going to the playoffs naked right now. I'm picking up Kenneth Gainwell. I'm rolling with it, and if something happens to Saquon Barkley, I do not have to fight for this. This offensive line for the Eagles are doing very good. They're getting a good push up front. Kenneth Gainwell, even though he's not going to give you Saquon Barkley numbers, he's going to give you some decent numbers when given volume. He's already starting to trend that way. They're already starting to give him some more touches here on the back nine of the season. Might see that trending that way towards the fantasy playoffs. I want him stashed. Jeremy McNichols is getting volume right now, but these running backs could be back. Austin Eckler with a concussion could be back sooner than later. Again, we see what he's doing with the touches. He can score touchdowns. He can get you opportunity. He can volume into fantasy production. We saw that a few times earlier in the season. Jeremy McNichols is a running back you're picking up off waivers right now anyways, so you might be looking at him for the rest of the season. Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell, if something happens to Derrick Henry. Someone mentioned in the comment section in one of the videos this morning that Derrick Henry is bulletproof, so they might have put a hit out on him because they probably dropped some bad karma due to that. That might have happened, so you may want to watch this backfield. When it comes to injuries, never say that someone's going to get injured and that someone can't get injured, because the opposite will always happen. I believe in that energy. I'm not predicting anything, but Derrick Henry's a guy to watch. He's getting a lot of workload. He's been fabulous this year. He's been very good. Top tier running back. But if you have him, you may want to have Justice Hill just in case. He's going to skyrocket in value. This team runs the ball. They use their running backs. Keaton Mitchell too. He's a pop gun running back just like Jaylen Warren, but he's not getting the touches right now. He shouldn't be because you got Derrick Henry getting all the work. But again, you want to pay attention to this backfield. Khalil Herbert has not been sexy with the Bengals. Chase Brown's been holding it down, looking good. Khalil Herbert has some pop, has some wiggle, has been fantasy relevant at times throughout his career at Chicago. A guy to watch on this offense just in case something happens to Chase Brown. This team moves the ball. They'll be in some good game scripts. You're paying attention to Khalil Herbert. Jerome Ford, because he's been fantasy productive before. He's been somewhat productive now with Nick Chubb. But if Nick Chubb goes down, something happens to Nick Chubb, you're going to want Jerome Ford because he's been productive before. This team's moving the ball a lot better with Jameis Winston. Jaylen Warren's more than a handcuff running back. He's getting touches. He's a 1B back right now, but he needs to be added in all leagues. He needs to be rostered more than just 62% of leagues. He's getting a lot of work in the passing game. He's getting a lot of opportunity. He's a running back that could jump in value. Something happens to Najee Harris. On top of that, he's already getting some workload, so he can help you out in a pinch. Roschon Johnson behind DeAndre Swift. He's getting work in the passing game. He's a hammer between the tackles. His value will jump a big time if Swift goes down. If I have Swift, I will get Roschon just in case. Swift does have an extensive injury history back from his time in Detroit. That's something to pay attention to. But it's been pretty good over these last 24 months or whatever. DeAndre Swift's been decent this year. He's been very good, actually. Roschon Johnson's had his moments this year. A good handcuff to get if you have Swift. Craig Reynolds, surprisingly, will be productive at times, off and on for like a one-game set through his career. Something happens to Jahmyr Gibbs or David Montgomery, it's next guy up. They like him. He's a hammer. He's steady. Not a sexy guy, not a guy that really should be picked up, but watched from afar. Emanuel Wilson. If something happens to Josh Jacobs, he's going to grind it out between the tackles. He's going to get the work. He's going to get the opportunity. He's proven too. Watch his workload throughout the season. Watch what he's done. Go look at the tape. Very shifty in space. He is a guy that can deliver the hammer as well. Emanuel Wilson will get the workload. If something happens to Josh Jacobs, you're looking at all the other running backs on this offense from afar. Marshawn Lloyd, if he's healthy, he's a shotgun running back to pay attention to. Cam Akers has some upside, is getting to work whenever Aaron Jones has to come out, and he will be good in this offense to an extent. He'll at least volume into fantasy production every other game or so. That's something to look at, but everybody will go after him if something happens to Aaron Jones. The views on my video says that. If something happens to Aaron Jones, everybody will go after Cam Akers. Dameon Pierce, if something happens to Joe Mixon, he's been banged up all season long. But the volume's there in this offense. This team moves the football. Could get goal line looks. Could volume into production if something happens to Joe Mixon. I'd watch him from afar-ish. Pay attention to this backfield a little bit. Trey Sermon. We already had this experience with Jonathan Taylor out. Him, Goodson, and company. They're running backs you just throw in. You're chasing the touches. You're praying that it lays down for you. He hits one out of like every 3 games when he's getting the workload. Same thing with Goodson. That's just what you're seeing out of this backfield. And that's really what I'm trying to tell you when I'm saying you're chasing the touches when it comes to these backup running backs. Dearness Johnson will get work in the passing game. He's on an offense that will use the running backs to give them opportunity. He's not going to be a hitter. He's not going to be a league winner. Maybe in a one-game scenario if everything flows his way. But a guy that could trend correctly if both these running backs go out. But you're really not stacking chips on the Jaguars offense. Tyjae Spears won't play versus Houston 4 days ago, concussion. But for the long term, if something happens to Tony Pollard, you will look his way, have some burst, have some speed. Same with Julius Chestnut. We'll just get workload and opportunity. You're chasing the touches to see what happens. Tyler Allgeier is one of the top handcuffs out there. If something happens to Bijan Robinson, he's going to get a ton of workload, a ton of opportunities. He will be a league winner because he's going to get 20-plus opportunities, that targets and touches, goal line looks. Tyler Allgeier could be a league winner if something happens to Bijan Robinson. This team's moving to football in most games. I'm looking at him extensively if I'm looking for a backup running back. Jonathan Brooks, with Miles Sanders out, he's going to ramp up to that role. That role with Miles Sanders was running about 10 to 12 routes per game. On the top end in some of those games, he was over 20 routes, depending on the game script. We got a good schedule coming up. He's very explosive, and he's an upgrade over Miles Sanders once he ramps up, once he feels good on the NFL field. He's a lottery ticket running back, a good handcuff to Chuba Hubbard right now, and a good guy to have on the back end of your roster as an upside play for when we hit the playoffs here, just in case he starts hitting with that little workload. Jordan Mims and Jamal Williams. Jamal Williams is dealing with an injury. He's been in and out. He's been banged up the last few weeks, but could come back. I like Jamal Williams too in this offense. I like them both. But these running backs here, you want to pay attention to. Alvin Kamara has been holding steady. If something happens to Alvin Kamara, you're looking at these running backs. This team is going YOLO, pushing the ball downfield, and the work rate could be league winning in some of these matchups with how this offense is ran. Sean Tucker is a guy to be stashed. If you're looking for a running back to stash, all the main stashes are gone. If something happens to Bucky or Rachaad White, he's going to get workload. This team likes him. They talk about him in conferences all the time to the media. Sean Tucker, when he did get his opportunity, he cashed. He'll score touchdowns. He'll get the workload. He can be using the passing game to an extent. Bucky Irvin will get more. Rachaad White will get more. But still, in this offense, he can cash for you. And we got an interesting schedule, too. Going forward, if I have either Bucky Irving or Rachaad White, I want Sean Tucker as my stash. Audric Estime, you got a bad taste in your mouth because they said they were going to feature him and then they didn't. But if something happens to Javonte Williams, he's going to get those grinder yards, goal line looks, and everything else in between. And it ain't going to be a heavy workload because Jaleel McLaughlin will still get his. But you're going to want him off waivers, at least stashed so nobody else could use him. Kareem Hunt, because Isaiah Pacheco's back. He should be back this week. He's practicing even more. Full participation. I push Kareem Hunt in this role, and we know what can happen with Kareem Hunt if something happens to Pacheco again, and he'll probably be getting enough workload with Pacheco to grind into fantasy production and maybe some work in the passing game as well. Kareem Hunt is the guy to keep stashed just in case if he gets dropped, you may want to have him stashed. I mean, it's the Chiefs offense. They're moving the ball. They're going to have to spell Pacheco. They want him fresh. They got to ramp him up. Kareem Hunt's a guy to look at. Kimani Vidal and Hassan Haskins, Gus Edwards with J.K. Dobbins out. You want Vidal because he's the upside lottery ticket stash. Haskins, the Michigan man, he's going to get those grinder yards between the tackles. He's going to get some work. They're going to explore with him. Gus Edwards is the starter now, so evidently everybody's going to be picking him up off the waiver wire this week, but that's how I would play this backfield. Amir Abdullah, I'm looking for Zamir White or Alexander Madison to be back in the next few weeks. He's already picked up. He's already rostered, but I'd hold on to him just in case, unless there's another lottery ticket you like better. But he is a lottery ticket running back. We've seen enough. He'll get work in the passing game. He'll get that opportunity in the short game, seeing targets. Trey Benson, premier upside, one of the top handcuffs in the National Football League. I like him a lot. If something happens to James Conner, he has the potential to be a league winner. Him and Amari Demercado. Every time I bring up Trey Benson, I bring up Amari Demercado. He may not always be pictured, but I bring up Amari Demercado. I believe these two will split up the work damn near evenly, and Amari Demercado will get a lot of work in the passing game, and he's also explosive. I would want both running backs, and if I can't get Trey Benson, I got my finger on the trigger. Blake Corum is a premier handcuff running back with a lot of upside, a very good draft pick for the LA Rams, and one thing we'll know about Kyren Williams is getting all the workload, all the touches, all the opportunities, but if something happens, you're going to want Blake Corum. If I have Kyren Williams, I'm making a precedent to get Blake Corum as my handcuff and using him as my last roster spot. Jordan Mason is back to this. He's back to this. If something happens with Christian McCaffrey, you know what we're getting out of Jordan Mason. And then we're also looking at Isaiah Garando as the shotgun running back to gamble with out of this offense. Zach Charbonnet, if something happens to Kenneth Walker, he's going to get work in the passing game. He's going to grind it between the tackles. He's got a lot of upside. They might explore a little bit more with Kenny McIntosh during this time if they feel like they need to. But Zach Charbonnet would be to get, and he has proven to give you some fantasy production with that opportunity. Those are the running backs that we're looking at as stashes, as handcuffs. Some of them are graded higher than others, but it doesn't really matter unless the starting running back goes down. So we're watching these backfields from afar to see what happens. Pick up your favorites, but be malleable to the other running backs once they start seeing their opportunity. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on the way out. One thing for watching. Catch you on the next video.